That emotion of self-pity is not letting it in.
Okay.
What do you have to be pitiful about? This is a wonderful thing, isn't it? So, let it in. See it. I'm wrong. I don't need to believe this anymore. That's what I'm saying. A lot of times we let be our response to something. The emotion, that was enough. Now I had the response. But no. The response is, I've been living in illusion all of my life. I'm wrong. I'm going to live something that I see now. This is something I can do. Because it turns out the reason I couldn't do it is wrong. That emotion of self-pity is looking back, isn't it? But if I sit here right now, all there is joy, isn't there? So I don't want to buy the self that says the proper way of dealing with this is to feel sorry for me. I want to sit in that realization. I can do a thing that I couldn't do before. And let that be an illusion. I feel sorry for the 50 years I wasted. What has that got to do with now? That I guess it's not 50 years for you, but okay. That doesn't exist. This does. And right now, if that's really an illusion, I can do this other thing now. Any questions or comments? That one wasn't really private, but it was so emotional. I'll leave it private. But it's still an interesting thing. I see an illusion that has stopped me from doing something for many, many, many years. And the self wants to sit and grieve. Woe is me, I'm so picked on. For 50 years I didn't get to do such and such. Well, I hate to say it, but you ain't doing it now either, are you? Because now what you're doing is feeling sorry for yourself for the last 50 years. Like, now, if I can let that be an illusion, I can do it. Can I? So the self wins again. It says that is how you respond to this event. And say, you know, what was wrong with me? Why didn't I see this earlier? And stuff like that. And that's its response. Disidentify from that and center yourself in the awareness. And see the joy of freedom that now I can. And even better, don't even leave it as a frigging ideal like that. Do it! See, that's still up here in the head, isn't it? An idea. Do it. So it kind of says to me, as an observer, so I may be wrong, I think you're still fighting seeing it as an illusion. This is the self's last gasp attempt to keep you from really getting it. Isn't in that moment of real perception that it's an illusion, it's gone. And I can do whatever that other thing is. That's one of the things that we had this little thing where somebody, simple little thing, had a belief that they had to use an alarm clock to wake up every morning. It was just a belief. This is what I have to do. And then they noticed that they kept waking up 5 minutes before the alarm clock and couldn't explain that. Because the belief said, that's impossible. That alarm clock has to wake you up. So the explanation is very simple, isn't it? I don't need an alarm clock to wake up, except I can't see that because I believe I do. So I'll sit and, it's really simple, but it's what we do all the time. We'll deny evidence that a belief is wrong. So I was just sitting there and I said, I suspect that the complete and total explanation for why you wake up 5 minutes before the alarm clock is that you don't like the alarm clock. I don't think we need to look any further than that. She said, yeah, I don't. If you're not busy denying facts, it really isn't confusing at all, is it? It's very simple. I don't like the alarm clock, so I wake up before it goes off so I can shut it off so I don't have to listen to the damn thing. There's no big mystery here, is there? It's confusing because I have a belief that I won't see as an illusion. I need an alarm clock to wake up, and I don't. I don't know if that's clear to you, but that's what the self does all the time. It has beliefs about what is. It sees contradictions to them, and then creates a mystery instead of being wrong. And then it apparently moved on into seeing a whole different illusion. And then the self wants to go into self-pity. Because if it can keep the awareness occupied with suggestion, the awareness will not report to X. This was an illusion. And so tomorrow, when this event is all over with and I've moved on, I will never have reported this illusion to X, and I will still have it. I will have just gone through a bunch of emotion over it. And so then a month from now, I will realize that I still believe the thing that you're feeling sorry about right now, because you didn't really sit down and disidentify from the self and all its little tricks to keep you occupied with everything but being aware in it right now. And if you can disidentify from that and really look at this as the awareness, it'll just be an illusion. You report it to X, you said, look, I've been lying to you for 50 years now and telling you that such and such is true when it isn't. And I don't believe it anymore. So I'm not telling you that lie ever again. And that's what needs to be done. We need an awareness to look at it and confess. I really messed up. It was my job to be aware, and I decided to believe a lie and deny evidence. for 50 years. I didn't tell you the truth on this subject. And now I see it's a lie. And let X do all that stuff that's necessary so the next time the suggestion comes, I don't buy it. I know it's wrong. But I need that moment of confession. And they made sure it didn't happen by getting me involved in emotion. They're tricky little bastards, aren't they? And that's, perhaps, I hope, I'm using this. I know I can't be real clear because I just don't want to divulge the secret. This is an emotional issue, okay? But maybe out of that we can see how come we say that disidentification is the building, the foundation we have to begin with. If I can disidentify from what the self wants to do with this, then I might actually get it done. But if the self comes along and I'm still buying the suggestion of self-pity, it can trick me into doing nothing at all, can't it? But if I can look at that suggestion, even if I'm still suggestible to it, and I know how difficult it is to see the illusion in pitiful me. So maybe I can't see that right now. That whenever someone suggests that I be pitiful, it's a lie. But I can at least disidentify from it and say, wait a minute, that is not me. And I don't know that it's an illusion yet, but I'm not getting involved in it. I've got something else I want to do right now. You're distracting me. I want to deal with this thing I just saw. I just saw a big illusion in the life, and I want to confess it, I want to see it, I want to experience it, and let it be an illusion. And you're distracting me with another suggestion that I haven't seen as an illusion yet, that I'm pitiful. But disidentification would at least let me do what I set out to do, wouldn't it? This is not me that is feeling pitiful. So I'll let the self sit there and do it because I can't see it as an illusion right now. It'll go on feeling pitiful, but I'm going to be kind of busy over here doing this while you sit there and feel pitiful, okay? I want to look at this other thing. Without disidentification, that's about impossible to do. It can grab me with another suggestion. And so I never get anything done. Does that make sense? I mean, is it clear that you can kind of see it? This is another thing I probably shouldn't even say. I hope you'll have enough intelligence not to take this too seriously as a suggestion, okay? But this one's experience and the efforts to actually do transformation instead of pretending. It was one of the most interesting things that ever happened in this life, because it was like opening the gates to hell and letting every demon out that had ever been made throughout the entire life. Because they were freaked. Uh-oh. If he does this, we'll never get anything from him again. The game's over. They freaked. I heard suggestions from when I was 2. Things that I had forgotten all about. They tried every single suggestion they had ever given throughout the entire life. First they tried the ones that, worked yesterday. And when that didn't work, they went through the entire history and said, maybe this will still get him. Oh, shit. Well, what about this one? I literally heard every suggestion that had ever been given through the entire life while they looked for something to distract me from what I was doing. Don't let him do this. It was very clear that's what was going on. Whatever you do, don't let him do this. Because this is the end game. He's about to make the final touchdown, and the game's over. They do that throughout your life. Whenever you start to do something that might give you a little bit of freedom, they find some way to distract you so you don't actually get it done. That's just what they do. And we need disidentification. You cannot get by without it. Or the distraction works. I still have lots of illusions. So they can always find some suggestion based on something I don't see as a lie to distract me and say, this is what's real right now. Unless I can use disidentification to get centered back in the awareness that says, I don't know if that's real. I kind of intended to do this. And now you want me to do that, and I don't want to.
There was a weird one that came up this morning. I was in bed, and relatively speaking, high state, looking over what we've been doing this weekend, and something came up which hadn't come up for maybe 20 years, which was they couldn't find anything to get me afraid of. They couldn't find an actual concrete suggestion. So what they did was, it was free floating. It was just anxiety in the solar plexus. I looked really closely. There were no thoughts. Maybe there was something unconscious there, but I think I recognized it as something that they'd used in the past, which would just be plain roiling, free-floating anxiety, which then fastens onto, then finds a reason to be afraid. It's very strange.
The experience has been that most of the time there's a picture.
It wasn't a picture, it was just a sensation.
So those pictures happen at such an unconscious level, they're tough to catch. That's been the experience, that most of the time there's some kind of picture that they're presenting to you as reality. If that makes it any easier, but regardless, yeah. That's what they're going to do. I've got to find something to occupy this person's attention so they don't pay attention to now. Because the only place where I can do anything is now. So whatever you do, don't ever let that person pay attention to now. Always get them to think about something else. That's just kind of obvious, isn't it? The only time I can do anything is now. And the only place I can do anything is here. So whatever you do, don't ever let that awareness pay attention to now or here, because then they could get something done. I cannot do anything when the attention is on then, you see, the past or the future, I'm now helpless. This is the only place I can do. I can think about the past. I can think about, I mean, the past is a funny illusion in the first place, but the future, that is completely illusion, isn't it? It's more difficult to see that the past is an illusion. I understand that because memories are so real to us. But the future, that's complete illusion, isn't it? Because it's just a projection. That's all it can ever be. I have no clue what's going to happen next. All I can do is just project an illusion or an extrapolation. But the only place I can act is here and now. Because that's the only place I've ever been. That illusion that that's not true is so strong that I know damn well that saying these words is not enough. This is something you've really got to see. There is no other place than here and now. And that's the only place I can act. So the Nara's have created this tremendous illusion that there is a past and there is a future, so they can keep me from paying attention here and now where I can do something. And they give me this lovely illusion that doing something is thinking and feeling. Because they don't want me to get anything done. Because let's face it, the thing that I'm going to be most interested in doing if I wake up a little bit is being free, isn't it? For a long time, that's probably going to occupy most of the attention. What I want more than anything else is to be free. I think I'll worry about what I'm going to do with that freedom when I got it. Right now, that's what I want. So how do you suppose the tyrant in your life is going to feel about the fact that you want to be free? The interesting thing is that I can't even think about here and now. Because by the time I've formed the first sentence in thought, here and now has changed, hasn't it? And whatever I'm thinking about ain't here no more. It takes too long to think about it, doesn't it? By the time I've had 3 sentences in the head about it, it's over. I really can't even think about here and now. I can think about something that occurred, an event, and see if I can understand it, but it don't do me no good. The event's long gone. Maybe that'll help me to understand something should that event ever occur again. So I'm not saying don't think, because that does have some use, doesn't it? But it don't do me good for this event. It's gone. By the time I'm through thinking about it, with an awful lot of events, except really slow ones, it's over. I've got to find some way to live in that awareness. that can deal with things without thought. And then use thought for what it's for, which is basically just to plan the order in which I'm going to do things that are a little bit complicated, huh? That's kind of what thought is for, is to plan things. It is not for understanding. Although you can do that too. I'm not, but the understanding will always come too late if you've got to use thought. And really, doesn't most of your understanding come from having seen something, not from having thought about it? When you are just in that awareness, sometimes just looking at a thing clearly is all that's necessary. I don't really need to think about it. Really need that continual disidentification, so that when something comes up where I do really, really need it, like a moment like that, when I need a moment's peace to consider this thing, it's there. And when they try to distract me with something terribly important, like how pitiful I am, I see it as a distraction from self, and don't go into it, okay? I mean, really, isn't what you really want to do is just confess that illusion to X and not have it anymore? That's what you really want to do, isn't it? I don't think what you really want to do is sit there and wallow in the fact that you had this illusion for 50 years and look at all the things I probably missed for 50 years. No, I just want to get rid of it, thank you very much. And then see what life is like without it. But self-pity is a good one, I've noticed that. About every time somebody sees an illusion, that's what I see them do, is go into self-pity. Poor me. I had this illusion for a really long time. Yep, and I bet you still got it. And so the next time you look around, you're going to see you still have it, because you think this is an adequate response to that. Got a question?
If you were going to put this into a mathematical equation, would you say thinking and feelings plus action equal results?
No, because I'm capable of doing that without thinking. And the feeling is a consequence. So, feeling is a consequence of, look, the way that feeling happens is, I know I've said this a few times this weekend, but people seem to be really puzzled about feeling. I sense an event, okay, something that's going on in this moment. And somehow or another, I see what this event is. I don't want to get involved in the details of that, well, you know that we do that, what the event is. And I put some kind of value on the event. Now I have a picture of reality that I can kind of respond to. It's not just, it sort of made sense out of it, hasn't it? It's not just a bunch of experiences that make no sense to me, because I really can't deal with just a bunch of experiences that I can't make sense out of, can I? So I have to go through this process of seeing the event, kind of making sense out of it, and then determining what I can do with the event, what value there is in it. That goes off to X, who then prepares the body to respond somehow to the event. That preparation is to either get the body ready to do something, or to say something, or whatever it is I'm going to do to respond to the event. In order to do that, there's a whole bunch of funny little chemicals that are released in the body to release the proper energy, to move muscles in exactly the right way to do this thing, okay? Some of those chemicals I experience as an emotion or feeling. Their true purpose is to precisely adapt the body to this moment and what I'm going to do. Not really to give me a feeling exactly. They have a function to just get the body perfectly adapted to this situation and the action that X is about to take. But my experience of them is a feeling. So feeling does not determine action. It is already the action. Because we misunderstand that, we get caught in this vicious circle where the feeling justifies more action of the same, especially when it's based on an illusion. And so I report the same damn thing to X, and I get caught in this loop because I believe that feeling determines action, which it does not. Feeling is how I saw this event. That's right. And so it only seems to determine action because I get caught in this loop where I say that it's justifying what I'm doing. If I really live in this moment, feeling will be in a constant state of flux because this moment is in a constant state of change. Now, every perception of now reports a different thing to X. X prepares an event, an action. I do that thing. We're in a new moment, and it happens over and over and over again. And feeling is as much in a state of flux as this moment is. Constant change. The only thing that I want to do is determine that the feeling will always be high. But when we look at the idea of states of being, if we look at just the higher states, because I don't give a damn about the other ones. We'll just look at these three states, all right? Contentment, vital interest, and exhilaration. Just those three. How much room for change is there in contentment, and yet it's still contentment? How many ways can I be content? There's zillions of them, aren't there? Just because we have a word for this thing, it's a whole range of things, isn't it? It's a word covering a whole range of things, isn't it? Like, look at water. We call it water. But how many temperatures can water have before it becomes ice or before it becomes gas? It's not like water, is it? If you go to California and you get in the ocean, it's cold. If you go to the Gulf of Mexico and get in the ocean, it ain't cold no more, is it? It's warm. But we call it all water. And if you think about it, that's utterly meaningless. You have not said anything practically, have you, if you just call it water? Because inside that concept of water exists an incredible variation of states that the water can actually take, doesn't it? So if you tell me there's a nice place to swim, I don't know if I'm going to like it or not, because I only like it when it's warm. So I'm going to have to get a little more information out of you before I decide to act on your little suggestion. There's a place to swim over here. It's got water in it. That's not adequate to me. I'd like to know it's warm. That's the way states are, okay? How many different degrees of contentment are there? So even though the state is in constant flux, I want to keep it in a certain range. And just in contentment, I can deal with almost every event that can come along in life with some degree of contentment, can't I? There's only a few events in life where contentment just it won't work. It really isn't adequate, and I'm going to have to change state. And that's because contentment is a low state of being. For most of us, it's outrageously high. But it's a low state of being if you look at the whole tone scale instead of just the little ghetto that we live in. It's a low state of being when you see the whole. And so we can't draw this thing the way it is. It would be way too difficult. I'd have to put all the low states of being down here and then draw the rest of it. And it's just too hard to draw that way because the amount of energy is fluctuation in all the low states is like almost zilch. By the time we get up to vital interest, I can go through incredible ranges of changes in energy and still be in vital interest because it's a huge territory. Anger, on the other hand, is a very small territory. There's far fewer changes in energy level that I can do in anger without going either down or up. Now I'm in a different state. You understand? So while the feeling is in a constant state of flux as it responds to what's going on, it's still the same general feeling. If I'm not buying suggestion, of course, if I'm buying suggestion, then I bounce all through the various states. You know, one moment I'm afraid, next moment I'm angry, then I'm bored, and I'm feeling self-pity because I'm not actually responding to now. I'm responding to the illusion I have of now. Now, that's the only thing that there really is to say about feeling is I want to determine by how I perceive this moment the area of feeling that I'm going to live within, it will still change constantly as life responds to constant change in the environment. But I can determine by how I perceive this moment what part of this energy level I will be in. If I perceive this moment as good, I will probably never fall below contentment, will I? So I determine feeling by how I perceive things. We use feeling as a justification for perceiving something in a certain way. So I look at this moment, and there's something about it I don't like. I report that to X. X prepares the body to fight with this moment so it can be changed. Because it sees it, I see it as threatening in some way. And then I get a certain feeling, either fear or resentment or anger or self-pity, so on. And then I say to everybody, well, I'm really pissed. That justifies me in doing something really nasty. And I use that feeling as a justification to continue seeing reality in this certain way, and I get stuck. But I can choose not to do that. I can choose to look until I see a way to see this moment as good somehow, and then I ain't falling below contentment. I really cannot conceive of being anything less than content if I think this moment is good. Feeling comes from how I see now. It does not cause anything unless you use it as an excuse to continue seeing this moment in that way. And that's what we do, isn't it? So we have this illusion that feeling generates action, and it is not true. What generates action is the way that I am seeing this moment. That makes sense, Colin? Jonathan?
Yeah.
It's not the way we've been trained to see reality, is it? But if one is willing to really observe, this can be seen. This is the way it actually occurs. And because we have been really just trained so heavily to see it differently, it takes a bit of observation to get past the illusion that we've been told. And we've definitely been told that. And that is the way we see it. Just the equation that he said. Thought plus feeling equals action. That is what we have been told since the moment we arrived here. We generate that illusion and it distorts our perception, so we actually see that as occurring, and guess what? It has never happened that way. That belief is so strong, though, that that is actually the way we perceive it. But it does not happen that way. It happens because the awareness is not doing its job. That when senses give me information the mind associates it with a past event and tells me what to believe about this moment, and I tell that to X, and X does something that I've done a zillion times before. And so I go on the way I have been forever. And I need to step back from that automatic associating of the mind, which is the most useful thing there is when you're not using it to understand reality. That associating is the most remarkable filing system I have ever seen. As a computer programmer, I stand in awe of it. I would probably make $1 zillion if I could figure out a way to get a computer to do what our minds do. It is awesome. Because it gives you almost instantaneous access to every piece of information you have ever encountered throughout up to, for all we know, 1,000 years of experience. Because that appears to be its capacity, as best we can estimate, since nobody bothers to live that long. It seems to be capable of doing this for up to 1,000 years of experience, having instantaneous access to every experience you've had for 1,000 years. That is just awesome. And the way it does it is by a filing system called association. It takes every experience that you've had and it categorizes it by perhaps 500 possible ways that you could use that information, and then files it under all those categories. So then whenever you have an experience, that experience is like such and such, and instantly every piece of information on that subject is available to you. It is a remarkable tool, because that is the one problem as an awareness that we have with dealing with the physical world, is that it requires memory, and the awareness doesn't have one. It always exists now. What is there to remember? It does not have a memory. But we live in this physical world where it is a heck of a lot easier if you can remember what a car is and what it's for and how to use it, and not have to rediscover it every time you run into one. Isn't that about right? It would be very difficult to deal with the physical world without a memory. We would be quite limited in what we can and cannot do, wouldn't we? Once upon a time, I accepted a little challenge from a man who is long dead. And I read one of his books called Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson, which, amongst possibly many other things, one of the things it was designed to do was to mess with the mind until it went and stopped working. So that sounded rather interesting. I was kind of curious to see what it would be like to be without a mind for a while, and I read the book and allowed self to be subject to its influence. I've noticed many people do not do that. They read it without allowing anything to happen. That's a very simple thing to do. All you do is read it and think about it constantly as you read. And then nothing will occur. because you kept it out. What you experienced is your thoughts of the book. And the book never happened for you. But at any rate, so I read this book. I was quite a young man at this time. And sure enough, if one reads it without thinking about it, it works. And so I spent a period of time with the mind just sort of lurching. It didn't completely break down, but it would work by fits and starts. So I would walk outside and I would see people walk up to these bizarre metal objects and then take other little metal objects out of like funny containers they had in the weird things they had draped over their body, and insert the metal object and go twisty, twisty, twist, and then be engulfed by the metal object, which I just found utterly fascinating. What are these people doing? That is the bizarrest thing I've ever seen, and then suddenly the metal object would zoom off. And I thought that was just the most remarkable thing I'd ever seen. What a novel idea. Until I wanted to get somewhere, and I didn't know how. The only thing I knew to do was walk, thank goodness. The kind of really low-level instinctive stuff was still there. And so for a while I sort of envied all these people that they had these magical metal objects that whisked them away while I walked. And then I noticed that there were these other people that would stand by this metal pole. And they would all sort of mill around this metal pole and peer down the street. And then this big metal object would come along and they would all step into it and they would be whisked away. And so I joined them. And I got whisked. You understand that without that association, everything is new. You haven't a clue what it is. But boy, is it outrageously wonderful. I just thought that was the neatest thing in the entire universe. A metal object that whisks you off wherever you want to go. I didn't dare try it myself. I knew I had one of them. But I couldn't imagine in this state what would happen if I tried to use it. They did look a tad dangerous to me because they just were really fast. Yes, sir.
I saw the movie Meetings with Remarkable Men, and then
Oh, that's garbage.
I got the book. I got the book, and
Even Gurdjieff knew that book didn't work.
well, I tried, this is what I want to say, is I was trying to read the book, and I happened to skim to a couple of pages from the end of the second to last chapter, and I found what appeared to be the only 2 pages in there that didn't just bore me into sleep. Is where they were talking about Brother Al and Brother Says talking about their
I know, but
sermon.
that actually says more about you than it does the book.
Okay, well,
No,
so be it. But
no, not okay. I'm not going to tell you what it says about you. I'm just going to point that fact out and suggest that you see that, okay?
I don't. I hope this is
No, go ahead.
relevant, but it seemed the point that I seemed like wanted to be said right now was that the experience I got from reading a Gurdjieff book was that it just seemed like gibberish and tedious and boring, and there was like 2 pages that made me wake up and pay attention.
Okay. I don't have any personal attachment to Gurdjieff's books, to be honest with you. I wanted to see if I could with words. Give you a little bit of what the experience would be like to be without a mind. So I use the build-up to kind of.
I'm asking the question, is that what Gurdjieff was trying to do, is just write a 600-page book that just is dreadfully tedious?
I just got through telling you one of the things that he was trying to do.
Break your mind or turn off your brain.
Which you refused to allow to have happen. And I told you exactly how to do it, and you used that method, didn't you? You thought about it, and you had opinions about it, and you decided that it was boring and tedious, and so it did not work on you. And so it says more about you than it does the book. The book will work. But that doesn't mean that it forces anything. You must let it. And I told you how to do that. Should you desire to have this bizarre experience, I mean, be careful. Because being without that automatic, that's really what it breaks, is the automatic association. It doesn't work very well under that particular set of conditions Gurdjieff induces, if you allow it. It breaks temporarily, thank goodness. It disturbs temporarily. It puts a certain stress on the mind so that for a period of time, it cannot automatically associate. And that was also one of the fascinating experiences that was had from that, was because that pretty much makes it impossible to function on anything more than a really base instinctive level. And it lasted long enough for this one anyway. I don't know how long it will last for others. But for this one, it lasted long enough that I had to learn to use the mind, because I needed it on occasion. And so I had to learn to run it myself and get it to associate, because it would not do it automatically, guaranteed. But what I'm trying to show you is that this thing that you call you is not you. It is a marvelous machine that you could be using. And that is one of its uses, is to have instantaneous recall of enough information that I can make sense out of what is going on in this moment, so I can deal with it relatively quickly. And I don't have to spend this prolonged period of time just figuring out what is going on here. That is one of its uses. Okay? It has some other uses, primarily in planning, which is another thing that the self is, the awareness is not real good at. It's really good at manipulating symbols. And the mind really helps in that. But you've turned it into all there is. And it is no good at living. It's no good at being aware. It's a storage retrieval system. It's not an awareness. It always sees everything as a memory. So you're never here. You're always in a memory. And it is possible to be without it. It's bizarre as all get out, but it is possible to be without it. throughout this life, there's been a number of times when, for various and sundry reasons, either I've chosen to or an event has occurred that like broke it for a while. And it didn't work. So I've kind of gotten used to it. I suspect for most people that is inconceivable. They've never been without it. But throughout this life, there's been a number of events like that where it stopped working for a while, and I was just stuck here all by myself. It is bizarre. Because you have to try and discern the use and function and meaning and so on of all these peculiar, strange things. It's a wonderful thing in the mind, yes, ma'am.
So awareness doesn't know?
What do you mean, no? Awareness knows, it does know, but I mean, not the kind of knowing I think that it doesn't
Like the mind with the
see, that's not really knowing. That's just not really knowing. It does know. It knows for real. Okay? The mind memorizes and may or may not ever know. The awareness knows from experience. So, like, it's one of the reasons why I described the car part of that experience, because watching these folks do this bizarre thing, it eventually all made sense. I thought I wanted to be whisked away too. So I knew. You understand?
Yeah.
Even though there was no associating to be able to glance at it and from memory know ahead of time what they were doing, I knew shortly. They twisted those funny little metal things, and I got to tell you, I thought it was weird when they got in